Hey, what's up? This is Hans from Request for Music, and I'm back with a new tutorial on Synclavier. Today I'll be starting off making sort of a bass sound, or we'll try together to make some sort of a bass sound as a starter, and who knows what I'll end up with. Okay, I'll be making this bass sound using an FM modulation kind of thing, so I'll be needing my modulator and a carrier, and the only thing is that I want to try, or at least I want you all to hear what the effect is of using a modulator harmonics that is lower than the carrier harmonics. And of course, what you see is that the first harmonic here is now the first sound that you hear. So if I press my middle C, which I do now, this is the sound of the carrier, and that's the height of the carrier. And if I wanted to be higher and I need the modulator to be lower than my carrier, I can't do that because they're on the same harmonic. So what else could I do? I could change my harmonics on the carrier side to having using next harmonics in the range, and being an octave apart. So if I take the second one, for instance, and I'll leave the first one out, I have a I have a next octave, and so I could go into my mixer and change this back to my lower octave, and I would have the same sound again. If I would use the next octave, which is the fourth one, uh, I would still have to drag my octave down one more to get back to this same level. But now at least I have the option. Sorry. At least now I have the option of going of modulating with a lower harmonic than my main carrier is. So we're going to try and see what it does. Okay, of course I don't hear any modulation yet because the value in the mixer is off. Obviously there's 100% here in modulation for the actual modulator here in this slice, but still I need to dial up my frequency modulation amount. So if I use this, and this is the partial modulation, standard it's at 0, and I could dial that up and it will go through all of the modulation things. Take care that you don't use too high values straight away. It goes from 0 to 1, but at 1 it's really very distorted because of the way that those harmonics in frequency modulation works. So I could go either, because even if I have this at 100%, I could go back into my time slicer and dial my modulation down and dial it up again if I wanted to get exactly the level that I wanted. And the other thing is that you shape the overall sound by using the envelopes. So if I set this and go back into my envelope, and although it looks like it's a very short envelope, actually the sustain is at 100 for both the amplitude and the harmonic envelope. So actually I would have to take my sustain level for my harmonic envelope down and then use a decay to shape the sound, and then I would get sort of a filter kind of effect, yeah, because we don't have filters in Synclavier because of the way that the system works. So we use, instead of filters, we use the envelopes to shape the sound in a way that you would normally do with a filter. Obviously a filter is normally handled with an envelope as well, but in this case I use the envelope for the harmonic to do this sort of filtering. And the only thing is that I have to shape my complete sound by going into my time slicer and creating the sound by using the carrier and the modulator to get a different kind of wave. So, okay, if I go into my envelope now, for instance, if I wanted to have sort of a wah kind of sound, a wah, things like that, you would have to think of that as being the attack in the harmonic side. So if I turn this up and you hear there's, if I really wanted to have that as a sort of wah and stay at that level, then obviously I'd have to dial my sustain up again, and it would stay there. And if I wanted to have more of a wah effect, I would have to turn my modulation up. something like that. Yeah. So and then for the rest, again, as I said, now because I have lower harmonics, I could try what it does if I add some to it, because I have a whole range of modulators, of harmonics to work with now. And if I wanted to something like that, and if I wanted to have some more high values in there as well, I could obviously use the higher harmonics. And if I wanted to stay in the octaves, I would have to use the 1, the second, and those are the numbers here on the top or on the bottom. So I'd have to use the 1, the 2, the 4, the 8th, and the 16, and yeah, concurrently the 32nd, but obviously that's not in there. So, and the other ones are in harmonics. Yeah, there's things like the 5th and the 2nd and or sorry, the 3rd and the 5th and so on, and here as well. So if I wanted to have some sort of harmonic sound in there, like a bellish or what kind of sound, I could just do something like this, or maybe change that a bit more, and you'll get a much more like that in there. If I wanted less bass, I would go back into my first harmonic, which is the same as this octave. The only thing is that since there is sort of how do I say that? The harmonics, they turn back in the audio spectrum. That's how frequency modulation works, and that's why you get a lower part in it again as well, and that's what you get rid of if you get all in the low frequency range. So if you start at the first harmonic and this first harmonic as well, you wouldn't have that much, but there's space underneath, so that's where the sounds come up. Because even if I get my eraser on and I make sure that there's nothing there, but as soon as you have an inharmonic an inharmonic harmonic, how do I say that? So not an octave, so to speak, then I get this sort of lower tones as well. So I have to be aware of that. But at least you can just try and see what it does, because most of the time it's the combination of harmonics. As you see that there's going to be some very strange shifts in there, and that's the kind of sound that you hear. But anyway, again, I could do something like this and make it more bassy by getting my lower and if I wanted to be a bit more usual bass, I could just drag this to the left to have 0 attack, and then put in some decay. And the only thing is that if this is shorter than my amplitude envelope, you will hear it get back to this sine wave. So if I drag back this sustain to 0 as well and put up the decay, I've got something like that. Yeah. And again, in shaping, I can do stuff like using the peak, for instance, because if I lower the peak and then give it a bit of decay and maybe the sustain up, you get this moi kind of shape as well. Yeah. And and the first wah kind of thing is because of the attack, of course. So if I take this back, I get a very short. And if the attack on my amplitude envelope is 0 as well, it has a very short attack, which gets a bit too ploppy sometimes. So that's why it's most of the time it's just a bit up there. But for instance, okay, this could be some kind of a bass sound. So just experiment with that, and if you need some more bass into it, just drag it up here, and you could also drag some up on the carrier side as well. Something like that. And if you wanted to sustain a bit more, obviously you could go back into the envelope and maybe turn up the sustain level for this. So something like that. So you could do a lot with that, and obviously you could go back into your mixer again and give it a bit of fine tuning on the chorus, for instance, to get it a bit more flowing sound. And you could also do stuff with the FM ratio, but the problem is there that if you as long as you're at equal values like 1 and 2, 3 not, but the 4, like with the harmonics again, so 1, 2, 4, 8, 16 and so on, and the highest one is 16, then you're still in the octaves, but otherwise you're somewhere in the middle, and you might get very weird sounds but if you want to make bells, for instance, that would be the basis for doing that. But say that we would want to make sort of more of a lead tone instead of the bass, because okay, this was okay as sort of starter for the bass, so this was okay for a bass. But now if I wanted to make more of a lead tone, I wouldn't need it to be that low, so I'll get back and change my my slices again. So I'll go back to my first frequency on all and change back in my mixer to my normal 440. So something like that. What I could do if I wanted a lead tone, I'll need it to stay on longer. So perhaps I'll just leave the sustain on this and give it a bit of release, and a bit of release on this one as well. And then for the rest, I'll be shaping it with my time slices and my modulation. Apart from that, I'll probably want a little bit of glide, so I will have to go back into my screen and go into my portamento settings, because portamento is the way that single tones glide into each other and could possibly be a bit faster. So I'll take the rate down. And for the for lead tone, I probably want to have more effects on there, so I get back into this and drag up my reverb, and drag up my chorus a bit, and drag up my echo, because something like that, and maybe it's a bit too much echo, but anyway, you could take that out, of course. Then what I want is, let's see, how do I have the settings? Okay, I've got my frequency modulation fully open, which means that I have all of the control at the time slice by doing the modulation here. So but what if I wanted to change the sound by using my modulation wheel? Because what I did now was changing the pitch of the vibrato, or changing the amount of vibrato. I'll get rid of a bit of the release on the end. But so now, and actually, I'm working on the small Korg MS-20 controller, not the actual synthesizer, but just the controller. So I only have one wheel on this, and I'm using this because it's in front of my monitor and it's a lot easier. But I only have one dial to use, so I only have the modulation wheel. So I'll be changing the actual vibrato into a sort of standard setting. and I can go to my screen or to my normal panel for that, and I've got my first partial selected, and since all of these are the top values in this top cabinet are all for one partial, I can change the amount of vibrato and how it works for that, just that partial. So I could dial up my carrier for this, and maybe this is a bit too slow, so something like that perhaps, and maybe the carrier bit down. But the only problem is that it starts at the beginning now. So I've got my attack here, so I can dial that up, so it comes later. So a bit less rate and a bit less attack in there. I'll take some of the echo and stuff out because otherwise you hardly hear it. So a bit of chorus out, a bit of echo out, a bit of release, reverb out. Okay, stuff like that. Now I want to change my modulator wheel to affect my partial, or my amount of let's see, the amount of harmonic. Where is it again? The FM amount, yeah. Because if I change this FM amount now. Let's see. Oh, what am I changing? Okay, modulator wheel. Sorry, modulator wheel. I'm going to affect the FM amount with that. Yeah. The only thing, of course, is that I've got my frequency modulation fully open. So if I do it the other way around, if I take this down and put my time slices up, okay, so it's good as it is actually already. So I only took the FM amount down in my modulators, in my mixer, because now there was no headroom, so to speak, for this modulator setting here to work with. The same as with velocity. If I put my velocity up, I have to go back into my mixer and drag my volume down. Yeah, so you have to be aware of that kind of stuff. So now when I would have a pretty nice, pretty decent sort of lead tone, bit of old mini moogie like. And if I wanted to have it thicker than this, I could obviously work with the fine tuning on the chorus, so it'll be thicker. And the other way would be by copying the complete partial and detuning both of them. Yeah, so that's probably the best way to work with it. So I'd have to go back into my normal cabinet here and select this first one, copy it, go back to my second one, and paste it there. And then if I go back, it's harder, but it's louder anyway. So now I could detune it and maybe pan them aside a bit. So that's pretty decent. Yeah, something like that. So yeah, I think I'll leave it for this. I hope you this helps you in finding the correct lead tone for you, and we'll be looking at some other stuff in a later stage again. I hope you like this one. See you next. Cheers. Bye bye.